Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Duncan, and I'm the president of the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Candidates Forum, presented in partnership with Island Savings. The Chamber believes that voters should have every opportunity to question and learn in order to facilitate informed voting. This forum is a snapshot of the candidates and their platforms. It is an opportunity for you to ask questions about the issues that matter most to Cowichan and to the Malahat and Langford communities who share in this electoral riding. Before we introduce the moderator, we'd like to remind you that this evening's proceedings are being filmed, the entirety in which will be uploaded to the Chamber's YouTube and Facebook channels tomorrow for the benefits of those who couldn't attend tonight. Please be advised, if you do not get an opportunity to ask a question at one of the audience microphones, you will be recorded, if you do, you will be recorded as a part of this presentation. I'd also like to just recognize the Queen Margaret's and Shawnigan Lake School students that are our runners for this evening. If you have questions, please pass them to them or step forward to the microphone. The Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce is the largest business and advocacy organization in the region. With a growing network of over 560 members, our ability to serve our members and our community with these types of events is dependent in a large part on our valued partners. We are pleased to have partnered with Island Savings for this event. Unfortunately, an Island Savings representative is unable to attend this evening due to an emergency. Thank you again, Island Savings, for your ongoing support of the Chamber. We're delighted to welcome back Wade Simmons of Amber Education as tonight's moderator. Wade has been the moderator for the Chamber's Candidates Forums for, well, we don't actually recall a forum without him. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, please join me in welcoming tonight's moderator for this evening, Mr. Wade Simmons.
Good evening, everyone. All right, just before we get underway, let's just take a quick review of the process and protocol for this evening. We've got 2.5 hours, right? Cell phones to silent, please, just to be sure of that. All right. The candidates will have 3 minutes for opening and closing remarks. The order has been drawn randomly for both the opening and closing, and the candidates made aware of that order. There will be 1 minute for the candidates to answer questions which they are fielded. If a candidate mentions another candidate or party directly, then that candidate will have 30 seconds for rebuttal. Questions, 15 seconds long, please. We try to avoid sort of the preamble and a speech behind a question, so 15 seconds per question if you would. And the questions will be coming from some prepared questions from the Chamber of Commerce, written questions from the floor to which there are runners who are bringing those up to the stage, and then there are microphones, as you can see, left and right. And we'll be sort of moving from an oral question, a microphone question, to a written question and back and forth. Reminder, 1 question per person. That means not lining up twice to ask questions, but also means not asking a multi-part question, trying to sort of squeeze 2 or 3 questions into one. All right? You can also identify if the question that you're asking is intended for all 4 candidates or for any less than the full number. All right? Our last question will be taken at about 10 after 9 to allow time for closing remarks, and we'll be finished up for 9:30. All right? If you are asking questions, we are going to ask you to identify yourself by name and, if applicable, to identify that you are directly related to one of the campaign parties. All right? You'll find that I adhere to these times very strictly, so you'll hear me saying thank you very much, which is a cue for cutting off either the answer or the question at that time. We have timers down in the front row here who will be writing a yellow warning flag for a 3/4 mark in the duration of answers and a red for full stop. All right. Let's have respect this evening be the theme of the night. Please no talking over one another in attempts to obscure or interfere with candidates' remarks, and we'll get in as many questions as we possibly can this evening. So, without further ado, let's get underway. So, opening remarks. As I say, we've chosen a random order, and Mr. MacGreggor, you are first. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. and it's really great to see you out in full force, Cowichan. Really lovely to see you as you participate in this great exercise of democracy. As we're coming again, where have the last 4 years gone? I have been very proud to represent this area as your Member of Parliament for the last 4 years. I've been a proud resident of the Cowichan Valley for 29 years, and I feel very fortunate to now be making this place my home, where I'm raising my young family and living on a small farming property. I've always appreciated the people who live here, the issues that you've always brought to my attention, and the issues that are of concern to you, because they very much matter to me as well. And it's always been of particular importance to me as your Member of Parliament to make sure that those particular concerns get their due in Ottawa. I've identified 3 major issues in this campaign, which is based on the feedback that I've heard from many constituents over the last 4 years. They are making sure that we have an adequate housing system, that the federal government gets back into being the player it once was in providing adequate, affordable housing for people who can't afford it. To make sure that our healthcare system, through strong federal leadership, is really tackling those areas where people are falling through the cracks, making sure that we have a robust pharmacare system, dental care. Because I have to tell you, I'm getting really tired of meeting people in my constituency office who are having to make those tough decisions on a monthly basis as to whether they can afford to pay the rent that month, pay the utilities, or put good quality food on the table, because the cost of living is really affecting a lot of people and their ability to get by. And of course, what I think is going to be, or is, the defining issue of the 21st century, which of course is climate change. As a father of 3 children, I very much worry about the world we're leaving behind for future generations, and I believe that a federal government must take a leadership role in confronting this challenge, listening to the science-based targets, and making sure that we actually achieve them. So, it has been an amazing honor to represent you over these last 4 years. I have appreciated the many conversations that we've had over that time, and I very much look forward to the discussion that we're going to have tonight on the issues that continue to concern you. I hope that through tonight's discussion and through the 4 years of work I've done on your behalf, you will see to it that you can give me the trust again that you once placed on my shoulders back in 2015. Thank you so very much.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Good evening. My name is Lydia Hwitsum. Lilia is my traditional name. Thankful to be here in the ancestral lands of the Cowichan peoples. Just want to take a couple of seconds to acknowledge the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce and acknowledge the 500 plus members that have been contributing to our economy and society, and thanks for sponsoring this event. I was born and raised here. I was born in the Cowichan village and continued to raise my 2 adult children here. They each have their children. I now am blessed with 4 grandchildren that lift me up every day and motivate me to think about the next generation. I'm thankful for the presence of each and every one of you, youth, seniors, veterans, all of you that have joined us here, taking the time. I'm so honored and pleased and thankful to take this opportunity to run for Parliament, to take the time to be here with you. If I'm elected, I'll bring the same collaborative, positive, creative, and solution-driven approach that's helped me in my over 20 years of working for social justice, ecological justice, human rights, and Indigenous rights. That same approach has supported the development locally of the Cowichan Watershed Board, having the opportunity to co-found and be the first co-chair for Cowichan, for the Cowichan Watershed Board, that has had 10 years of whole of watershed thinking and having and investing in our watershed in a way that will benefit us for now and into future generations. This approach as well I've taken to chair a multilateral committee and co-draft reports and recommendations for amendments to the BC Environmental Assessment Act in order to incorporate the principles of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And that law, BC law, changed at the end of last year. I've worked at local levels, regional, national, and international levels, representing and advocating, as I said, for ecological justice, social justice, human rights, and Indigenous rights. Canadians deserve honest, ethical, caring leadership, framed in values including ecological wisdom, respect for diversity, sustainability, and social justice. We have a green climate action plan that will transition us to renewable energy and a strong green economy. We need to evoke that ecological wisdom. In this time of climate emergency, we need to have another green voice in Parliament. Another green voice in Parliament will make a difference.
Thank you very much. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer some of your questions tonight. Before we get started, I wanted to share you a few things about myself. I was born in Ottawa as part of a military family, and of course we moved all over the country, and I learned early the value of finding common ground and building new relationships quickly, skills that I still use today. I've been a small business person for the last 35 years in the construction and real estate industries. Prior to that, I was employed with the federal government as an RCMP officer in northern Saskatchewan, as well as I was employed with the federal government as in the Federal Immigration Department, resettling refugees from the Vietnam War in the early 1980s. And I also acted as an investigator for the Provincial Ombudsman's Office in Saskatchewan. Throughout my life, I've known that if you want your community to serve you, you must serve your community. I have volunteered for numerous organizations over the years, and currently I am a member of the board of directors of the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, where I was president in 2014. I'm also a director on the Cobble Hill Farmers Institute, and I was also the co-chair of the 110th annual Cobble Hill Fair this year. With my 4 grown children and family expanded with 6 most awesome grandchildren, my wife and I have found new roots in farming in the valley. Farming has given me a front row seat to the impact of a changing environment and the challenges of food security on this island. The changing environment is a key reason motivating me to put my hat into the ring for this election. This is a crucial election for the environment. The Liberals have invested more in the climate file than any other government in Canadian history. I am proud of the significant progress made in the last 4 years, and I will continue to work for that progress. I will be a strong voice at the table of government. We cannot afford to go backwards on the environmental file. There just is not time. While the challenges in the environment are critical, the economy needs to remain strong. Like many ridings in Canada, my riding, Cowichan-Malahat-Langford, is very geographically and demographically diverse. Liberals understand and support this diversity and are investing in all Canadians. Liberal government has accomplished many things in the last 4 years. We have lifted 300,000 children out of poverty. We have helped Canadians create over 1 million jobs, and we have been able to reduce the unemployment rate to its lowest level in 40 years. All that, and at the same time, making significant strides on the environment and Indigenous files. I believe in hard work, accountability, and the best decisions come from a consideration of differing opinions. Diversity is our strength. Unity is our power. My collaborative approach will bring together the challenges of the environment and the economy to keep Canada moving forward. Thank you very much.
Ms. DeLong.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alana DeLong. I'm the Conservative candidate. I grew up in BC, went to junior high in Colwood, high school at Vic High, and then went to a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics at UBC, then off to work in Alberta, where I was in the computer industry for 20 years, and then 14 years as the MLA for Calgary Bowl. My BC education gave me an abiding belief in democracy. I believe that government should be controlled by the people through their elected officials. That's why I knocked on every door in Calgary Bow before every election. And that's why, though I am now 71 years old, I've already knocked on more than 7,000 of your doors to get to every one of you that I possibly can. How else can anyone claim to represent the people if you have not actually listened to them? I also believe that there is no such thing as government money. Every nickel of that money belongs to the people of Canada and should be spent respecting how hard Canadians had to work to earn it for the government to be able to spend. Canadians do work hard, but of late, we've been working harder and not getting ahead. Too much of our hard-earned money is being taken by the government. A while back, I knocked on the door of a 67-year-old woman who had worked hard all her life, but who now had a heart condition and was now not able to work anymore. Her income was $11,000 a year, and the tax man was after her for another $700. We were both in tears by the end of the visit. This is unacceptable. Budgets do not balance themselves. Any government department can come up with enough spending ideas to double their budget, and it takes hard work, careful analysis, and perseverance for your elected representatives to just hold back the government from reaching deeper and deeper into your pockets, let alone having an elitist PM handing out $12 million of your money to his billionaire friends at Loblaws, or the $155,000 for one red leather couch. As Ralph Klein used to say, what would Martha and Henry think about that? Well, what do you think about that? Is that really how you want your money spent? So what will the Conservatives do? They're going to leave more money in your pocket for you, for your kids, for your parents.
Thank you very much. I have three questions which have been prepared by the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce, and we'll start with the first one of those this evening. But now is a chance, if you would like to present a question at the microphones, to line up left and right. If mobility is presenting a challenge, then we do have runners at the top of the flight of stairs who can bring a microphone to you. So as we go through this first question, it's a good time, as I say, to line up if you would so wish to do so. So the first question prepared by the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce, we're going to begin with the Green Party and work our way across the table from your side, Ms. Hwitsum, over to Mr. MacGreggor. The question is, so the topic is small business. The question, if you are elected, what is the most important thing you want to advocate for in Ottawa on behalf of this riding's businesses? If you are elected, what is the most important thing you want to advocate for in Ottawa on behalf of this riding's businesses? Ms. Hwitsum, you have 1 minute.
Oh, here we go. Thank you for the question. It was very important to recognize the significant contributions that small businesses make to our community and our economy and our society. So if elected, a top priority would be to ensure that there is a fair taxation framework to recognize that when we're developing a taxation system, we take into consideration small business contribution, looking to how it is that we can continue to partner and build up the exposure, marketing, and other opportunities to lift up our local economy and society by supporting small business.
Thank you very much. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. With regards to small business, I think it's the government's responsibility to create a climate where the small business can thrive. Right now, our economy is sort of running on all cylinders, or firing on all cylinders, and doing quite well. And I think that we need to keep that happening. The tax rates are now reasonable. We have reduced them in the last 4 years for small businesses, and I think we are as long as we can keep that going and keep the unemployment rate down and that sort of thing, the businesses are happy if the climate is good.
Thank you. Ms. DeLong.
Well, thank you. In the last 4 years, it's become more expensive and complicated, more complicated than ever before to run a business. The payroll tax hikes hurt the bottom line, and the unprecedented tax hike on small businesses in 2017 ended up costing small businesses even more. So what are we going to do? We're going to repeal Trudeau's tax increases. We are going to be reducing federal regulations by 25% by implementing a 2-for-1 rule for new regulations. That was something that BC was a leader here in the early 2000s, and they were very effective at simplifying their government because of it. And we're going to mandate that ministers and regulators to support innovation, economic growth, and global competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. MacGreggor.
Well, first of all, I would like to recognize the economic backbone that small businesses are, and I've met enough small business owners in my constituency office, and I've helped them with their tax problems to know how fine of a line they're riding, and often they're making sure that their business succeeds and their employees are paid before the owner takes anything, so they work very hard. The NDP was the one that was proposing the small business tax reduction, and we're the ones that held the Liberals to their promise. But, looking at other things, I think we need to look at the merchant fees that are charged to small businesses when they use financial systems, but also looking at the pressures that's on their employees. Many small businesses have, 2, 3, 4 employees, and when those employees decide to start a family, those childcare services aren't there, and that can put a lot of stress when you lose someone just because they want to start a family. So I think by allowing childcare systems to be funded and organized and the spaces available, that puts less pressure on the employees who are able to continue making sure that small business has value.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's turn to the microphones, and a reminder, we'll ask you for your name and if you are directly affiliated with one of the campaigns. Let's go to microphone number 1. Sir, the floor is yours.
My name is Aaron Podolsky, and yes, I have been known to volunteer occasionally for the Green Party. My question is for Alistair MacGreggor, the NDP candidate. The production of liquid natural gas in BC depends on fracking. Your leader, Jagmeet Singh, is on record at different times for both supporting and opposing the $40 billion LNG Canada project.
I need a question, sir. I need a question.
Is your party for or against it? And in the event of a minority government, would your party, if opposed, work to stop it?
Mr. MacGregor.
Very clearly on the record over my last 4 years of not being a fan of LNG, and indeed our leader and indeed our party's platform makes a very strong commitment in our overall goal of fighting climate change, of getting rid of fossil fuel subsidies. From the federal jurisdictional point of view, absolutely, we must take a leadership role. We've committed to those scientific reduction targets that are going to be held to account by a new Climate Accountability Office. Of course, the provinces have their jurisdiction, and there's, of course, a lot of First Nation rights and title in our efforts of reconciliation. We have to make sure that self-determination of First Nations in the North is being respected on our path to a new open nation-to-nation relationship. But absolutely, I can confirm here and now that as Member of Parliament over the last 4 years and going into the future, my goal is to make sure that my kids have a world to live in, that we have a clear goal of reducing greenhouse gases, and I will do everything in my power in Ottawa to make sure that's the thing.
Thank you very much. This is our first written question coming from the floor, going to all 4 candidates. Mr. Herbert will be starting with you and then moving to the right-hand side and finishing with the Green Party. So the topic is healthcare. Given that there is a 22% child poverty rate in this riding, 30% in the city of Duncan alone, what will you and your party do to combat this issue? Given that there is a 22% child poverty rate in this riding and 30% in the city of Duncan alone, what will you and your party do to combat this issue? Mr. Herbert.
Sure, we have, first of all, we've done quite a bit of this in the last 4 years where we've been able to, raise 900,000 people out of poverty. including about 300,000 children. And it's, you know, there's a lot of work to do still on that file, but it's a matter of, I think a long-term solution to this is education and the economy, right? Education and getting people into employment. That would solve a lot of those issues. But the work is ongoing, and we have been very successful over the past 4 years, and we will continue that work in the next 4, hopefully.
Ms. DeLong.
Thank you very much. Our whole purpose this term is get the cost of living down. And you'll notice a theme in all of our announcements that is our number one goal is to get the cost of living down. And for young families, it is especially obvious that they are, you know, it can be a really difficult time for them. And so the whole thing is to make sure that they've got more money left in their pockets. And so we're reducing the personal taxes from 15% down to 13 3/4. We're taking the GST off of your heating bills to get your costs down that way. And we're also going to be attracting better and higher paying jobs so that people have options that they can move on up and help make sure that their families are doing well. Thank you.
Mr. MacGreggor.
In a country as wealthy as Canada is, this is an absolute stain on a record. This has been going on for far too long. You know, with respect to what other parties are proposing, tinkering around with the tax code is not going to help families that are already mired in poverty because they are not paying tax. We have to look at the costs. So, you know, children are our most important investment that we can make because when they suffer in poverty, it really sets their determination in life. We have to start tackling this problem. I think one of the most important investments that a federal government can do is on the issue of housing. There is simply not enough affordable housing available. The federal government must take a leadership role, and for those who are on the wait list, we have to make sure that we're helping with the costs of rent. Too many families are making that hard choice. Am I going to pay the rent? Am I going to be able to pay the utilities? Am I going to be able to put good quality food on the table? Can my kids go to an after-school program? These must be tackled with a leadership role from the federal government.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. The issue of child poverty and how we can make investments focus on targeted approaches to recognize that we need to make investments that make a difference in the lives of children and families. We need to be concerned about ensuring we have a strategy for food security. We need to ensure that there are investments made in housing and accessibility to housing, whether we're looking at the role of the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to be as involved in social housing development strategies as market housing, looking at other ways that we can ensure we're supporting families through investments in childcare, making childcare accessible, looking at how it is that those investments and services are available close to the parents. Investments in our children are investments in our future, and we know that with the love and focus that we can tackle this issue, that we can move away from being having the highest child poverty.
Thank you very much. All right, back to the floor. Microphone number 2. Sir.
My name is Michael Vanderweel, and I'm not related to any of the candidates. I have a human rights issue. Abortion ends the lives...
Sorry, sir, just all candidates or any particular subgroup?
Sorry, to all candidates.
All candidates, okay.
Abortion ends the lives of over 100,000 unborn children each and every year in Canada. What will you personally do to end this tragedy?
Quiet, please. Ms. DeLong, we'll start with you.
Oh. Thank you. Wasn't ready for that. I'm afraid that our party has voted, in fact, the whole party has voted to not touch the abortion issue. And so it isn't just our leader, it is our whole party that has decided to do this.
Mr. MacGregor.
I will never, ever interfere in a woman or other trans person's rights over their own body. Full stop.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. I personally support the right to choose. We need to protect women's right to choose. If we're going to address this issue, how do we support women more when they're faced with violence and issues that lead to the subjugation of women's interests and the idea that we could actually choose for women? We believe in the right for women's right to choose.
Quiet, please.
The Liberal Party has a policy, obviously, of having the women's right to choose. Personally, I believe in that, and I always think it's amazing when some old white guy poses that question. And I'm a guy, obviously, but I've never been in that situation where it is me that is put in that situation. I think women have got to have the right to make up their mind what happens with their own body, and that's end of story.
All right, we'll return to the Chamber's prepared questions. The topic this time is taxation. The capital gains tax applies to many taxpayers in the middle class, whether it be the sale of the family cottage, a rental property, or a business. Increasing the tax to collect more from the wealthy will also mean a tax increase for the middle class and will affect rental property and business investment in Canada. What is your party's position on the capital gains tax and why? What is your party's position on the capital gains tax and why? Mr. MacGregor, we start with you.
Yeah, so our position on the capital gains tax is we'd like to see the portion of it that is subject to tax to be increased. I believe that, there's a very small portion of the population which is extremely wealthy, which makes huge gains off of this particular tax measure. But we also want to take it further than that. That's why the NDP is the only party that has proposed a wealth tax on fortunes of over $20 million. Because for far too long in this country, we have seen inequality grow. Those at the top continue to get more and more wealth accumulated, while people in this audience and throughout our communities are seeing their incomes stagnate. We believe that those at the very top need to start contributing a little bit more to really own up to the challenges that our country is facing, whether that is a just transition to a renewable energy economy, to making sure that we have fair farmer care for everyone and adequate housing. It's time for us to start having a more activist federal government that takes a leadership in these important roles.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you. The burden, we know that the burden of taxation is unfairly distributed. When specifically with respect to the capital gains tax, it really creates a loophole where I think highest earners are able to use their capital gains tax to lower the amount of their taxable income when the average employee is out there and the balance of their income is being taxed. So we need to look at closing those loopholes and ensuring that as we do that, we continue to support the development of capital that's necessary, but understand we need a fair distribution with respect to the tax burden, and close those loopholes that allow for whether it's corporations or offshore to get away without contributing to our society and benefiting through their contributions to necessary contributions to contribute to our society.
Mr. Herbert.
As far as the capital gains tax goes, what happens is that if you make a sizable capital gain, you end up paying 50% of the tax on that than you would on, say, employment income or some other type of income. I'm in favor of that. Actually, it's been in place for a long time in this country, and I think it's an incentive for people to invest in, let's say, revenue properties, that sort of thing. And a bunch of other different things that basically keep the economy going. And I would say that I would be in favor of continuing that policy.
Ms. DeLong.
Thank you. The Conservative Party has no plans at all in terms of changing the capital gains. And in fact, we really want to encourage home ownership. And so we are going to be re-examining the stress test so that it's easier to get a mortgage. And we're also going to be offering 30-year mortgages again, so that people so they can get in on that ground floor. It's so hard, that very first house that you buy, and so this will help them get in on the ground floor, because it'll spread out those payments over 30 years, which means that the house then becomes more affordable. Thank you.
All right, we turn back to microphone number 1.
Thanks, Wade. I should say I have a huge fear and loathing of having same car, different driver.
Sorry,
with
sir, I
the
need
Liberal
your
and
name and
Conservative
any
parties.
affiliation to a party.
I'm going local with this,
Sorry,
Wade.
excuse me, I need your name and any affiliation to a party.
You bet. No affiliation to a party. I'm Peter Rusland. I live in North Cowichan. I'm a taxpayer there. This is a question for all four. Will you and your party as RMP support with funding the proposed Cowichan Valley Public Art Gallery that is now proposed to bring big all traveling shows to Duncan and local as well in a climate-controlled facility?
Thank you. Ms. Hwitsum, we start with you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. There are really few sectors that have as small a footprint, really, as the arts and culture, and whereas a commitment on the part of the Green Party to recognize the value in investing in culture and preserving in this context, and creating an environment where we can preserve whether it's arts, artifacts, or otherwise that add value to our society. So we'd be looking to increase funding to Canada Arts and Culture organizations through the Canada Council for Arts, including looking at reviewing tax incentives as well for, when we're thinking about production or getting shows in, that opportunity to produce or support a tax benefit to getting involved in our local communities, in addition to the investment necessary to build this facility that would be valuable, contributing to the arts in general and supporting that exposure.
And thank you very much. Mr. Herbert.
I think the arts and culture part of the community is a big part of the economy. And I think across the country we are huge supporters of arts and culture community. I know where Mr. Rusland was talking about a specific project. I think I don't know anything about that project, so I really can't comment on it. But I think if there is a good business case for it, and there are grants available from the federal government, it was certainly supported in a local area. But that specific project, I'm not aware of.
Ms. DeLong.
Oh, thank you. Well, as an MLA, it was always such a joy to work with the people in the community that had some fantastic idea that they were bringing forward. And so I'm looking forward to supporting ideas such as this. Thank you very much.
Mr. MacGreggor.
Yes, as the Member of Parliament, I have met with the organization behind the Cowichan Valley Public Art Gallery. I have written a letter of support for them. I have publicly shown my support, and I think what they're trying to achieve here is a very noble and worthwhile goal. I think, building on what's already been said, we know that those investments in arts and culture, especially in local communities like ours, can have huge spin-off effects. And if we have such a facility in our beautiful valley, just think of the tourism potential, another feather in the cap of the Cowichan Valley Visitor Center, of the Chamber of Commerce, yet another reason. I know we already have a lot of reasons to visit the Cowichan Valley, but this would be yet another one. So yes, I have already publicly declared my support for this project, and I would be happy to help this worthwhile organization if I continue to serve as Member of Parliament going forward.
A written question taken from the floor to all candidates. The topic, the opioid crisis. Where do you, your party, stand on providing a safe supply of prescription-grade substances in order to stop the preventable overdose deaths from tainted illicit drugs in this country? Where do you, your party, stand on providing a safe supply of prescription-grade substances in order to stop the preventable overdose deaths from tainted illicit drugs in this country? Mr. Herbert, we start with you.
Yeah, this is a very large problem, and it seems to me that whatever we've been doing so far has not been working. The problem just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. It's causing all sorts of issues in our local area here for sure. I'm part of a group on the highway, business owners on the highway corridor, that are trying to sort of get a handle on this problem because it's causing pretty much every business on the highway issues. Now, you know, I remember when the previous Liberal government was in place in the province, this was a big problem. The New Democrats thought they had a solution for it, and whatever it was, it didn't have any impact. In fact, the problem got worse. If I had a solution to the opioid problem in this country, I would be a very busy person speaking all over the country. I don't have a solution for it. But we are going to continue to keep trying things until we figure out what
And thank you very
works.
much.
Thank you.
No, Mr. MacGregor, your party was mentioned in that response. Do you want the rebuttal, or are you? You'll take the rebuttal? Yeah, 30 seconds, pardon me.
Yes, absolutely. I think, you know, of course, when we look at the rate of overdose death rates happening in Canada, if this was happening with an infectious disease, we would have the army out on the streets. And the reason why so many people are dying is because the street supply of drugs is toxic. It is injected with fentanyl and carfentanyl. So absolutely, I think we need to look at some supposedly radical issues, looking at a safe supply. But New Democrats already have a 4-point plan to deal with this crisis. We'd like us to declare finally a national health emergency so we can bring those
thank you very much.
to bear.
Ms. DeLong, we're to you.
Well, thank you very much. According to data from the Government of Canada, 11 Canadians die every day due to the opioid crisis. What we are doing is not working. It's just not working. And we've really got to start switching our efforts into actual treatment. And you know, it takes money, it takes concentration, but that's the direction that we've got to go. We've got to move towards treatment, and we've also should be researching what works, because some, you know, what's happening now is just not working. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Sorry?
Yeah, you had your rebuttal. Now you have your minute to respond to this question.
Yeah, well, I thought I wanted to continue on. I also think we need to stop the criminalization of addiction. We need to make sure that pharmaceutical companies are held to account for the overprescription of drugs, and make sure that the full range of treatment options is available. The existing system is not working. It's time for us to take a new approach to actually treat this problem with scientifically based resources, because we can see the effects in our community, absolutely.
And Ms. Hwitsum.
Thanks very much for the question. In this crisis situation with respect to opioids and contaminated or poisoned supplies, in that context, when we see so many people dying, we have to be able to look at safe supply as an alternative. Safe supply is not the only, it's one aspect though. When we're looking at how we deal with the crisis in terms of dealing with addiction as a mental health issue and not just a criminal issue, so that we can start to address and support the sort of investments that go along with the potential for a safe supply, understanding the wraparound services that need to move people and support people to move away from their addiction so that they have the supports to become contributing members of society. And you know, as we think about these low barrier aspects, we also have to think about the overall safety of our community and those who are suffering through addiction.
And so just a reminder on that process. So if a candidate in their response mentions another candidate or another party, then that candidate will get a chance for 30 seconds to rebut those points, but of course still have the answer to their question time as well. All right? Microphone number 2, sir.
Hello, my name is Ian Locke. I am not affiliated with any of the parties, and this question is to all candidates. I'm a small business owner here in Duncan as well. I also work on behalf of small businesses in the downtown Duncan area. My question is, How will you work to support small businesses facing undue hardship and economic losses due to rising crime rates related to the opioid crisis?
Ms. DeLong, we start with you.
Oh, just a second. Cut this. Just a second. Yes. I'm losing my time here, aren't I? Sorry about this. We've got to start standing up for the citizens of this area, and the way we stand up is by having the police empowered to actually deal with the problem. And we can say well these poor people, they're addicted, okay, but that's not a reason for stealing. And we've got to stand up for them. We've got to make sure that the police actually have the ability and the capability to actually deal with the problem, to arrest them, and they
And
don't
thank you very
just
much.
turn up.
Mr. MacGregor.
Well, a couple of months ago, I believe it was in August, I went out in person with the so-called Cowichan cleanup crew, which is a collection of small business owners who've got their place along the Trans-Canada Highway. And I spent the morning with them taking a walk around the neighborhood to see what they actually do every morning. And it's a lot. And along the way, I was having conversations with them about some of the solutions, specifically like what the federal government can do. I know that the City of Duncan and the Municipality of North Cowichan are trying their best, but for far too long, I believe that municipalities have had all of this burden placed on them with not enough support from upper levels of government. So while I appreciate what small businesses are going through, it was nice actually to see that a lot of their proposed solutions were mirroring what I was actually trying to achieve, making sure that municipalities have those resources, but making sure that we're devising different treatment options, which is actually going to solve the problem at the source.
Ms. Hwitsum.
Thank you for raising the question and the significant impact that when we see social issues in terms of addiction being fed by crime, and the shrinkage and loss to local business and all businesses is significant. Just in terms of I've also engaged in the same steps that Mr. Gregor referred to in terms of getting out there and looking at what's happening, collecting the needles, looking at how what impacts are being made. So when I was out there, I thought what we need to do is engage with the local business owners, look at the supports that we currently have in terms of coordinating police services, coordinating other social services, because it occurred to me when we were out there that we need to not only deal again with the criminal issues and losses, but also look at how do we ensure that the safety of business owners is attended to as well, because there is some real potential harm and threats that have happened as a result of playing out the addiction cycle.
And thank you very much. Mr. Herbert.
Thanks for the question, Ian. I live this on a daily basis. Actually, my business is on the highway. Every morning, it's part of my chores these days, and it's to go out and pick up needles and garbage and people. Sometimes they're across my door in the front, and it's and the problem that I have with this, one of the issues anyway, is this is becoming normal, and I think that's the problem. That is part of the problem. One thing is we are throwing a pile of money at this thing between the provincial governments and the local governments. We are spending millions of dollars in what I like to call the homeless industry. My friend and I were at a meeting at the town of the city of Duncan one day, and we were the people with the problem. There was two of us that had the problem, and we had 14 people at the meeting, which were local politicians and what I like to call the homeless industry. If we were to take the money that we are paying people to solve this problem...
Thank you very much. All right, our final question prepared by the Chamber of Commerce. The topic is jobs. What is your party's position on the growing labor shortage recession, and what is your party planning to increase the volume of skilled workers in the Canadian labor force? Are you simplifying the process and eliminating hurdles like cost and bureaucracy? What is your party planning to do to increase the volume of skilled workers in the Canadian labour force? Are you simplifying the process and eliminating hurdles like cost and bureaucracy? Mr. MacGregor, we start with you.
Yeah, this is a question I have not only had posed to me from local businesses, but also in my role as the NDP's agriculture critic. There are so many farms out in our rural communities which are struggling with the labor shortage. And while they rely on the temporary foreign worker program, that in itself is quite problematic, because what they would ultimately like to see is for those workers that they've in some cases established a decades-long relationship with to have an honest pathway to citizenship. Absolutely. I think what it requires, I mean, Canada is a country full of regions, right? Our regions are very different from one another, so are our provinces. And I think what it requires is a federal government that is able to take that leadership role, but also to listen. Like, what are the needs of our local businesses, and to further stream that skilled labor to match with the businesses to see what they need. We know we have an aging population,
and thank you very much. Ms. Hwitsum.
Did he say Ms. Hwitsum? Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I just didn't quite hear. Thanks again as well for this question coming from the Chamber. In terms of addressing the labor shortage, I think we need to take the steps to invest in skilled workers, to ensure that the opportunities for the young people that are taking their steps in their careers, that they can be supported in whether it's the training or upskilling them in terms of being able to participate in a green economy, and really looking at where we have within our populations real opportunities. And we know we've got a large growing Indigenous population, and I think continuing to invest in young Indigenous peoples as well in terms of taking those steps to address the labor shortage. In addition, looking at what are the opportunities with respect to targeted investments, whether it's considering the temporary workers program, and looking at other ways that are more sustainable in terms of addressing the labor shortage.
And thank you. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. One of the ways of addressing this issue, I think, is with having enough training spaces available in post-secondary situation to train these people that want to do these jobs. I take my hat off to the Vancouver Island University people that have made an arrangement with the local school division here to train local kids, even in grade 11 and 12, to be welders. And that's one program, and it seems to be working very well, because one of the fellows that I work for, his son just graduated from high school and is now working as a welder out in the country. So there's that. The other thing is immigration, of course, with importing skilled workers into the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. DeLong.
Well, thank you. In some ways, this is a wonderful problem to have, because it means that there's opportunities out there. There's opportunities for our young people, and it's a matter of making sure that they get the education and the guidance that they can move on into those. But and it is Canadians. This is an opportunity for Canadians, and they should have access to those jobs first. But if we do get ourselves in a situation where we really do need more than our people working those jobs, then yes, we should be looking at the temporary foreign workers. But again, this is in a way, this is a good problem to have, but we still need to deal with it. Thank you.
All right, we turn to microphone number 1, sir.
Hello there. My name is David Slade, and I am a volunteer with the Green Party. I have a question for all the candidates. I believe that Mr. MacGreggor suggested that he personally was against new fossil fuel infrastructure projects that would jeopardize his children's future. I specifically heard his party leader...
I need a question, sir. I need a question.
When you go to Ottawa, if you go to Ottawa to represent your constituents and you find that your vote is whipped, how will you reconcile that? How will you vote your conscience and represent your constituents when you're faced with a whipped vote that may be in opposition to those?
Thank you. This was to all candidates. We'll start with the Green Party.
Thank you. The Green Party specifically does not whip their votes. So there, we wouldn't find ourselves in a situation in that context. In addition, just with respect to your question, we're firmly have a plan to transition away from fossil fuels and go and move towards a green economy. And so we're in a position, a strong position as Green Party potential MPs to be able to express our voice and ensure that we're not whipped and forced to vote in a way that's inconsistent with this, the interests of this riding.
Mr. Herbert.
The Green Party not whipping their vote is ridiculous, I think. For them to say when they only have 2 members that we don't whip our vote, they just removed a candidate the other day because they didn't like their views on abortion, so they got rid of him, which is the ultimate in whipping your vote, I guess. But when you only have two members of the Green Party in the House of Commons, all they have to do is look at each other as they walk in the House and say, which way are you voting, and I'll vote the same way. It's that is how it happens. If you end up with 3 or 4, if you can't get 3 or 4 people to get together to agree on something, that is the question.
Quiet, please. Let the candidate speak.
I'm just saying that it's it's really easy to say that we're not going to whip a vote when you only have 2 people. That's all.
Mrs. Hwitsum, the chance to rebut.
Hello? Yes, thank you. There will be more than 2 Green candidates in the next Parliament based on the Green Wave, I suggest. And we'll continue to vote our values as Greens in Parliament and assure Canadians that not being whipped means that we can have a strong voice for Canadians and ensure we vote our values.
All right, back to our regular sequence. Ms. DeLong.
Very much. I don't expect to disagree with my party on this issue. LNG is a fantastic fuel. It actually reduces GHGs when you replace coal with LNG. And our party is going to be working towards energy independence by 2030, and that does include LNG. Generally, as somebody who has been experienced in a party system for many years, I do know how to work within a party to get what my constituents want, one way or another.
Mr. MacGreggor.
Well, I think people join political parties because they in some way see their own personal values reflected in that party, and it's been with me the same for the NDP. Like, I find that I joined the NDP because I've always admired the fact that it's been sticking up for the most disadvantaged in our society over the last several decades. And when we as a caucus arrive at a decision, we sometimes take as little as a few minutes, sometimes long hours of debate before we arrive at a position. But it's all about making sure that your values are reflected in the party that you've joined. I always take the time to consult with my constituents. In fact, that's been a central focus of my time over the last 4 years, and I feel very comfortable with every single vote I've ever taken in the House of Commons. I'm here to defend that, and I'm always making sure that in every major decision, I have that feedback back from my constituents. Will they always agree with everything I've done? No. It's impossible to find unanimity, but I feel that I can defend my decision.
A written question provided from the floor. The topic is environment, all candidates. What specific environmental initiative would you introduce to Parliament that your grandchildren would be most proud of? What specific environmental initiative would you introduce to Parliament that your grandchildren would be most proud of? Mr. Herbert, we start with you.
Well, I think I think if they were old enough to read our environmental plan, they would be very pleased with it. Personally, I have my thing now is electric cars. Although I don't drive one, I will be fairly soon. And it's fairly low-hanging fruit. Everyone in this room has a personal choice to make in these things. And I think that we have to sort of do a shift in our mind as about electric vehicles and where we're going with this. Right now, we have 23 million vehicles in this country that run on gas. Less than 100,000 of them run on electricity. And we have to change that. My goal would be over the next 4 years to get it up to where about 30% of the new vehicles being purchased in this country would be electric.
Thank you. Ms. DeLong.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of discouragement out there right now when it comes to climate change. People are thinking it's impossible to fix. We are not taking that attitude. And what we're doing is we are attacking the problem directly. And we in Canada, we actually produce 1.6% of the world's GHGs right now. And India, or China right now, is increasing at more than that every 3 weeks. And so we've got to address the problem where it is. It's a global problem, and we've got to attack it globally. And we do that with science and technology, working on our industries first, and then exporting that to India and China, where the problem actually exists. Thank you.
Mr. MacGregor.
Well, I believe I've already introduced it. I sponsored a private member's bill, Bill C-431, which is going to amend the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board Act to make sure that our national pension funds are no longer invested in entities that cause human, labor, or environmental rights abuses. Because I don't believe that in this day and age, with all the science out there of climate change, that our Canada pension plan should be invested in the fossil fuel industry. And so that's why I've already brought forward that initiative. I hope to start the conversation in Ottawa so that we take a long, hard look of where our pension funds are going. Do you know that the CPP is currently a major shareholder in Gazprom, Royal Dutch Shell, Coal India? Our pension plan fund should not be furthering the interests of the fossil fuel industry. And so, yes, I hope to leave that conversation as a legacy to not only my children, to my grandchildren as well.
Ms. Hwitsum.
I can never hear you.
Yep, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Ms. Hwitsum. Yep.
Yeah,
sorry.
when they're talking, sorry, I just couldn't hear you. And thanks very much again for this question. I think there are things that we can do with respect to legislation and regulation when we're thinking about how we set into place whether they're laws or legislation or policy to address this. One, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, just off the top, that could be, we could really do work to amend that legislation to ensure that it's actually putting a priority on the protection of our precious ecosystems. Directly, we could legislate, put into law the process to divest from fossil fuels with actual legislated targets that we measure against. And then we can look into the future, and our grandchildren can look into the future, knowing we stood up for our environment, we did the best we could to protect our ecosystems, and that we know we owe it to future generations and to ourselves
And
today.
thank you very much.